Volkswagen says it is selling its controversial factory in China's western Xinjiang region. The German car maker has been under pressure.
Recent actions by China have sent shockwaves through the European Union, leaving member nations scrambling to respond. After challenging the US, BRICS member China is now confronting the European Union for a possible trade war.
Take a look at this chart. It shows how much lithium the EU is producing. It may look like a lot, but compared to the rest of the world, it's only 0.1%, basically next to nothing. Lithium is the white gold we need to make batteries for electric cars, and huge ones to store renewable energy. So a pretty important mineral for the green transition the EU is trying to finagle. But 0.1% means the bloc has to massively rely on imports. And you don't need to be an expert to see the big problem here, because it means any trouble overseas could spell disaster for the EU's battery needs.
I think the EU is panicking.
Europe is very, very late.
So the European Commission, which draws up new laws for the 27-member bloc, has hatched a plan. They want to build out a homegrown lithium supply chain, from mining to processing and turning it into batteries, all of which is going to happen in someone's backyard.
Europe is placing tariffs on China over EVs, and the move has not gone well with Beijing. BRICS member China warned that the escalating frictions on tariffs could trigger a trade war with the European Union. For the uninitiated, the EU has proposed hefty duties on Chinese imports of electric vehicles. China has criticized the measures of the European Union, claiming that the duties levied are excessive and need subsidies instead.
The idea of China knowingly allowing fentanyl precursors to flow into the United States runs completely counter to facts and reality. Shortly after Trump's announcement, the Chinese yuan slumped to a 4-month low of 7.2730 per dollar. The Canadian currency slumped to 1.41 per US dollar, its worst level in more than 4 years, while the Mexican peso stumbled to 20.5 per dollar. Trump's announcement also hit Asian stocks.
China and the BRICS alliance assert themselves against the US and the European Union in trade and commerce. This warning coincides with a 3-day visit to China by Germany's economy minister Robert Habeck, starting Monday.
That basically the German manufacturers are also importing cars that they produce in China back into the European and German markets. So we will even in our own, if you want, car industry.
China, a BRICS member, stated that the EU holds full responsibility for resolving the issue of high tariffs on imported electric vehicles, EVs. It cautioned that failure to address the matter could lead to a trade war, with both sides resorting to retaliatory measures. The European side continues to escalate trade frictions and could trigger a trade war, said a spokesperson for China's Commerce Ministry, adding, the responsibility lies entirely with the European side.
Lu Pengyu said, quote, China believes that China-US economic and trade cooperation is mutually beneficial in nature. No one will win a trade war or a tariff war.
This declaration comes as BRICS aims to challenge the influence of the US, EU, and other Western allies. According to the ministry, the EU cannot intimidate or coerce either China or the BRICS countries. Further, China is evolving ways of decreasing the use of the US dollar in foreign trade payments by encouraging developing countries to use their local currencies to pay for imports. Alongside this, BRICS is pressuring the EU to comply with their trade terms. In its recent report, the IMF noted that 19 countries have reached more advanced stages of pilots and experiments with CBDCs. Among these nations is the United Arab Emirates, UAE, a relatively new BRICS member, already pressing forward with its CBDC testing.
To disappear cash. They want you to only use the currencies issued by the central bank digital currencies.
The BRICS alliance has been strategizing to launch a new CBDC to settle cross-border transactions. This initiative aligns with their broader goal of challenging the dominance of the US dollar by prioritizing CBDCs or local currencies in global trade and commerce. Through these efforts, BRICS aims to reshape the global financial landscape and foster a multipolar economic system.
As you can see, while their foreign reserves are a lot, their external debt is massive as well, with over $2.39 trillion.
In its latest blog, the IMF has pointed out the favorable implications of central bank digital currencies in increasing financial efficiency and payment finesse, and likely fostering financial inclusiveness among the BRICS nations. The blog also pointed out the benefits for nations in the Middle East, emphasizing how CBDCs could drive robust growth in the financial sector.
Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Whereas the G7 makes up 10% of the global population, BRICS countries are home to 41% of all the people in the world. But still, some 43% of the world's GDP is concentrated in the G7 countries, whereas BRICS account for over a quarter of the world's economy.
According to the IMF, 19 countries, including Bahrain, Georgia, Saudi Arabia, and BRICS member UAE, are in the advanced proof-of-concept stage, with Kazakhstan taking the lead after 2 successful pilot programs. CBDCs are a promising solution for improving cross-border payment services, which remains a crucial priority for oil-exporting countries and Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC) members, such as Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Cross-border payments often need help with differing data formats, regional operating rules, and complex compliance checks, leading to inefficiencies. CBDCs designed to overcome these challenges could significantly reduce transaction costs.
In 2001, an economist at Goldman Sachs pointed out the fast growth rates in Brazil, Russia, India, and China, coining the acronym BRIC.
Some countries have already implemented innovative technology platforms to address cross-border payment issues. For instance, the Arab Monetary Fund developed the Buna cross-border system in 2020 as the digital currency interchange between nations. CBDCs can also foster financial inclusion by promoting competition in payment systems. They enable direct transactions with minimal intermediation, reducing costs and making financial services more accessible. Unlike commercial banks, central banks do not prioritize profits, which allows them to offer lower transaction fees. Moreover, the increased competition spurred by CBDCs could encourage the development of advanced technology platforms, improving payment efficiency and extending services to underserved populations.
Setbacks, BRICS members have stuck together even after Russia attacked Ukraine. Most notably, China, India, and South Africa abstained from condemning Russia in the United Nations.
This benefit is particularly relevant to countries in the Caucasus, Central Asia, the Middle East and North Africa, MENA, and low-income nations. However, for CBDCs to deliver their full potential, barriers like low digital and financial literacy, lack of proper identification, distrust of financial institutions, and low wealth levels must be addressed. By tackling these challenges, the adoption of CBDCs may yield more benefits. The spotlight is on the petrodollar agreement, as the US dollar's future as the dominant currency in global trade hinges on Saudi Arabia's stance. The kingdom faces a critical decision: to continue accepting the dollar or to give preference to local currencies. The Chinese yuan is the most noteworthy, stepping in as the most dominant currency in oil and gaseous industries transactions. Local currencies are now focusing on ending the dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, making the greenback's future look more uncertain. For instance, China has become the largest trading partner for Saudi Arabia's oil to the extent of billions of dollars per year. By 2024, 20% of Saudi Arabia's oil exports go to China, thus giving the latter a big say in the energy sector. It also shows how China becomes closer to Saudi Arabia when the petrodollar agreement expires, which raises questions about the supremacy of the USD. The existing balance in the international crude oil market can be significantly altered if the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia decides to increase the volume of its use of Chinese yuan for oil deals. The petrodollar agreement is still close to its conclusion, but Saudi Arabia still uses the US dollar for its oil trade. However, Atlantic Council's Hung Tran noted that the US has lost its influence in the region as China increases its relations with Saudi Arabia. This deepening partnership may encourage Saudi Arabia to increase the number of countries that accept its currency, the Chinese yuan and the US dollar. According to Tran, today, China is the largest importer of Saudi Arabian oil products, constituting over 20% of the kingdom's export markets. Since America's influence has decreased in the Middle East, Beijing has developed cooperation, especially in trade with many regional countries. If Saudi Arabia starts to accept the yuan for oil and oil-related products, it could be a sign that the US dollar hegemony is gradually eroding and paving the way for the yuan. The kingdom's actions regarding the petrodollar agreement have the potential to determine the course of the global economy. Tran concluded, how Saudi Arabia approaches the petrodollar remains an important harbinger of the financial future. BRICS is intensifying its de-dollarization efforts by engaging local leaders, municipal heads, and unions from over 21 developing nations. As part of this initiative, the BRICS Plus Forum has extended invitations to more than 200 mayors from these countries to participate in shaping the process. The meeting is set to take place starting June 21, 2024, and will include nations that often go unheard on the global stage. By promoting local currencies, BRICS aims to strengthen native economies and offer hope for greater financial autonomy. The alliance is gradually advancing its de-dollarization agenda to diminish the US dollar's global dominance. If successful, de-dollarization could have significant repercussions for the US, potentially triggering massive inflation and driving up the cost of daily essentials. In contrast, BRICS stands to gain from this shift, positioning local currencies as the preferred medium for international trade and fostering a new financial order. Paetongtarn Shinawatra, chairwoman of Thailand's ruling party, praised the BRICS Plus Forum 2024 for empowering nations often excluded from global financial discussions. During a meeting, she thanked the alliance for giving these countries a platform to share their perspectives. She emphasized fostering a multipolar world through BRICS initiatives, including de-dollarization. We are confident that under Russia's BRICS chairmanship, countries previously unheard will finally have a voice, Shinawatra stated. In the past, a few superpowers dictated terms. Today, the multilateral world is paying greater attention to diverse groups and players who can express their positions. We believe in connecting various nations and cultures. Her remarks highlighted the transformative potential of BRICS in creating a more inclusive global financial system, while challenging the dominance of a few powerful nations. Russia is gearing up to host the BRICS Plus Forum 2024 on June 21st in the Kazan region, with delegations from 21 countries and over 200 mayors set to attend. The forum aims to connect with leaders at the grassroots level, reflecting the alliance's broader mission of fostering inclusivity and collaboration. On the eve of the summit, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov provided a significant update regarding the proposed BRICS currency. Ryabkov assured us that creating a currency to rival the US dollar would remain active and not be shelved or postponed. While acknowledging the challenges in its implementation, he confirmed that the decision to form the currency would take center stage at the upcoming BRICS summit in October. I would not say that this idea, BRICS currency, has been shelved, Ryabkov stated, but this does not mean this idea has been postponed. He hinted at rapid progress, adding that a bold and innovative scheme for the currency's formation would materialize much sooner than anticipated. This future is not calculated in years and decades, but much faster, he remarked. Ryabkov also disclosed plans to integrate digital currencies for cross-border payments. We are conducting consultations and negotiations with many friendly countries and BRICS members on using digital currencies for cross-border payments, he shared. This initiative aims to sever dependence on the US dollar and make local currencies central to global trade. The developments signify BRICS's commitment to reshaping the global financial landscape while advancing its de-dollarization agenda. The BRICS alliance is actively pursuing a strategy to weaken the US dollar's global dominance by encouraging the use of local currencies for trade settlements. By reducing reliance on the US dollar in cross-border transactions, BRICS aims to bolster their domestic domestic economies and diminish the dollar's influence on international trade. The bloc also engages with developing nations worldwide, urging them to adopt local currencies for trade instead of the dollar. This shift could significantly impact the U.S. economy, triggering a decline in multiple financial sectors over time. If BRICS moves away from the dollar for trade, the surplus U.S. dollars returning to domestic circulation could result in hyperinflation. At least 3 major financial sectors in the U.S. face direct consequences: banking, foreign exchange, and consumer goods production. The banking and financial sector will likely suffer the most, as reduced demand for the dollar in forex markets could destabilize foreign exchanges. A dip in USD demand would make it harder for the U.S. central bank to manage the currency's circulation. If BRICS countries' central banks stop stockpiling dollars, the returning currency could exacerbate inflation, a phenomenon the U.S. has historically exported to other nations. The technology sector could also experience setbacks, as inflation-induced economic strain leads to job losses and higher operational costs for multinational corporations. Businesses may need help to maintain stability as rising expenses erode profitability. Lastly, consumer goods in the retail sector are poised for price surges. The soaring inflation would cause everyday commodities to become increasingly unaffordable, straining household budgets. The Biden administration faces mounting pressure to address the challenges posed by BRICS and safeguard the U.S. dollar's role in global trade. BRICS's collective effort to detach from the U.S. dollar threatens America's economic stability and could reshape the dynamics of international trade and commerce.
An elaborate ceremony has been taking place in Pyongyang's main square to welcome the Russian President Vladimir Putin to North Korea. Pictures on state media showed ranks of soldiers and huge crowds lining the streets.
Currently, Russia is gradually stepping up political cooperation with North Korea in an attempt to challenge America's hegemony. Putin of Russia met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Wednesday, and both inked a deal focusing on a more strategic partnership against the Americans. This partnership suggests that North Korea is prepared to help Russia if the U.S. continues to impose more sanctions, which clearly shows that the two are now coordinating for a showdown with Washington.
Korea and Japan sign a trilateral agreement with the United States, something we thought we would never see in this region. These two from Tokyo and Seoul have historical, bitter grievances.
The strategic partnership directly refers to the U.S. as imperialist and hegemonic, and both countries are committed to opposing hegemonistic policies, negatively impacting their respective economies. According to the partnership treaty, Russia and North Korea will act in preparation with an American rival and its allies, stressing the necessity of resisting cooperation. This cooperation between Russia and North Korea, the need for stronger political and economic relations beyond the Western sphere, has been a primary focus of the BRICS partnership. For instance, after the United States imposed sanctions on Russia in 2022, other countries such as China, Saudi Arabia, and some members of the GCC aligned themselves with Russia by buying Russian oil and bringing stability to Russia. North Korea is adding its voice to this growing alliance, positioning itself as a supporter of Russia's opposition to U.S. influence. Kim Jong-un has blamed the economic challenges faced by Russia on the U.S. and Western-led hegemonic policies, pledging solidarity with Russia and advocating for the bloc's role in maintaining global strategic balance. The streets of North Korea had banners and Russian flags when Putin was visiting, and people greeted and shouted, "Welcome Putin," which showed that their relationship was blooming.
Comment at all on Putin's trip to North Korea and the possibility that there's going to be an agreement, a partnership agreement?
Yeah, look, no surprise that he went to North Korea after his so-called election. A real nail-biter that was. He was going to go on a little bit of a charm offensive here, and that's what he appears to be doing.
In response, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken dismissed the partnership as an act of desperation by Russia and North Korea. However, the increasing cooperation between these nations illustrates the evolving geopolitical shifts from a unipolar world in alignment with the United States to a multipolar world, and the attempts to counter it as long as BRICS countries look for new partners in the hope of diversifying from the West.
Canadian crude oil exports valued at over $90 billion annually are a key target for Mexico. Auto exports worth nearly $55 billion and agricultural exports exceeding $25 billion annually faces risks. Analysts warn that such tariffs could lead to higher prices for American consumers.
For the first time in almost 2 years, the Russian-led BRICS has outcompeted the U.S. in the LNG export market to Europe. Nevertheless, sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies did not prevent Russia from gradually expanding its market share. LNG deliveries to Europe peaked at 15% in May 2024, surpassing supplies from the United States, which stood at 14%.
Crude oil could severely impact the nation's economy, given that over 80% of its oil exports are destined for the United States. Meanwhile, Mexico, which relies heavily on automobile and agricultural exports to its northern neighbor, could face severe economic repercussions.
This increase in Russian gas exportation to Europe is remarkable, especially since Europe continuously pushed to diversify away from Russian energy. While many have been reducing their dependence on Russian imports, several Eastern European countries remain significantly reliant on Russia. The Putin administration has circumvented sanctions by striking deals with European nations, countries in Africa, Asia, and other BRICS members, ensuring Russia remains a key player in global energy markets.
United States, with combined annual trade exceeding $1.5 trillion. Economists caution that disrupting these ties could weaken the region's global competitiveness. Meanwhile, the U.S. administration defends the move, citing the need to address long-standing trade imbalances and border security concerns. As negotiations continue, the stakes remain.
Tom Marzek-Manser, head of gas analytics at ICIS Consultancy, noted the surprising resilience of Russian LNG in Europe despite the efforts to decouple and de-risk the energy supply. He acknowledged that while Russia has regained some market share, its dominance may be short-lived. The U.S. is actively increasing LNG production, promising capacities will be launched and will be able to compete with Russia shortly. However, the participating countries disagree with this, as demand for LNG grows, especially for the coming winter season. However, Russia currently holds a stronger position in LNG trade in the European market, escalating competition from LNG suppliers from the U.S. with the globalization of the LNG market.
Historical data from China, as published by the World Bank, we get to see that they have increased their foreign reserves every year, and in part because of this huge exports to other countries around the world.
Interestingly, by the first quarter of 2024, the ASEAN has become the largest trading partner with China. ASEAN countries traded 2.08 trillion Chinese yuan, $299.995 billion with China in the first quarter of 2024. The figure shows an increase of 8.5% in terms of year-on-year increase. This has brought the collective ASEAN account for 15.85% of China's foreign trade. This increase in trade with China has made ASEAN the largest trading partner of China, overtaking the EU and the US, which places second and third respectively.
This week, China has moved to support its exporters ahead of Donald Trump's anticipated tariff hikes. And its drive for self-sufficiency is accelerating. Is Beijing better prepared for another trade row with the US?
However, the bilateral trade with ASEAN has gradually increased, while the trade with China declined by 1.8% in 2024 and increased with the US by 1.1%. Some countries that comprise the ASEAN bloc are Brunei, Burma, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, among others. Most are in a strategic relationship with China. A good percentage of their trade with China is done in renminbi. Thus, the integration of China into the region's economy is tight. Besides the closer relations with ASEAN, China's trade impact extends through the BRI to developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These agreements assist China in gaining new trade partners and improving economic cooperation and arrangements, especially with other developing nations. South Korea is another notable trading partner, fourth among China's trading partners in early 2024.
His plea for a smooth transition have been met with more threats, with Trump announcing he intends to...
In the first quarter of 2024, mechanical and electrical products remained the biggest category of ASEAN's $300 billion of trade and payment with China, which comprised nearly 60% of China's exports to the region. This has resulted in higher export orders for Chinese private enterprises, meeting the rising demand for electronics products in ASEAN countries. According to this shift, the bilateral economic relations between China and ASEAN are deepening, and the electronics trade is deemed the main growth factor.
Exports more goods, services, and capital than it imports.
The development implies the existence of prospects for relations in the sphere of trade, as the need for mechanical and electrical products remains high in various ASEAN countries. As we can see, this trend contributes to the development of China's export industry and fosters China's economic stability when facing difficulties in the world economy. This trade relationship between China and ASEAN is likely to develop perpetually, cementing the economic bond and prop up growth on both sides in the future.
China's exports to the Group of Seven, or G7 countries, also dropped to under 30% last year. That's down from 48% in 2000. In 2023, China was the third largest partner for EU exports.
BRICS still has its foreign policy, as stated and expressed by Russia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, who said that they are not after the hegemonic power, but are advocating for a multipolar world. During a recent press conference, Lavrov blamed America for splitting the world into two groups according to their financial capabilities, and stated that BRICS is being used to abolish this division and bring justice to the global society. He emphasized that dominance is not part of the BRICS agenda, nor is the bloc interested in isolating itself or engaging in financial favors based on loyalty, as the U.S. often does. Lavrov described the development of a multipolar world as an irreversible historical process, one that any single power cannot stop. He stressed that BRICS focuses on providing a platform for fairness and international justice, not competing for global control. The foreign minister also highlighted that BRICS is not about achieving a singular hegemonic role, but about the emergence of multiple power centers in a polycentric world. This vision contrasts with U.S. actions prioritizing loyalty and financial incentives, underscoring the BRICS bloc's commitment to fairness in global affairs. Warren Buffett, the renowned investor, has voiced a firm stance on the enduring strength of the U.S. dollar, despite growing global skepticism and the deepening U.S. debt crisis. While anti-dollar sentiment is rising due to the increasing use of local currencies for trade and concerns over the U.S. economy, Buffett remains confident in the U.S. dollar's dominance on the world stage for the long term.
Train moving down a track that has no ending, and it picks up cargo and passengers as we go along. There's 330 million of us now, and there were only 4 million in 1790, and our farms are incredibly more productive. And
in Buffett's view, the dollar is set to remain the world's reserve currency for at least the next half-century. When Buffett predicted in 2015, he underscored that there is no other currency he expects to dethrone the dollar soon. He referred to the U.S. dollar as the only global reserve currency. He offered a powerful probability that the dollar will continue to be the world's reserve currency up to and beyond 2065.
It hit home to probably 40% of the households in the country, these people that have mortgages on their houses. And fear spread in the month of September 2008.
In particular, Buffett's optimism about the dollar is explained by the fact that it remains the world's currency for international business. In his view of foreign exchange, every currency currently exists and has sufficient structure to usurp the dollar. However, with the rise of such novelties as cryptocurrencies and the growing popularity of local currencies in some states, Buffett holds the line and assured that he would risk betting on the dollar's supremacy. His words imply that despite concerns about where the dollar is going, Buffett is sure that it will remain the world's leading reserve currency for years. Although Warren Buffett firmly believes in the future of the U.S. dollar, the realities of the global economy indicate that it already stands at the precipice of potential problems. The U.S. debt is still rising, with possible estimates that it may reach $35 trillion, which threatens the stability of the U.S. dollar. This accumulating debt and inflationary pressures are problematic for continued dollar dominance as a reserve currency.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a regional organization located in Southeast Asia, composed of 10 member states.
Secondly, there are internal economic barriers, and international attempts to forecast the demise of the USD are on the rise. The ASEAN bloc, comprising 10 Southeast Asian countries, is said to have been preparing to launch its currency to cut the chain on USD. These alliances can weaken the dollar's influence in the global financial system, especially with the BRICS grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, advocating for local currency export for import or a switch away from the dollar.
Ranging from public equity, fixed income, alternative assets, and cash products.
The shift from a unipolar financial system dominated by the US dollar to a multipolar system with more than one dominating currency is increasing. Fears about the weaponization of the US dollar also drive a general uptick in using alternatives, such as the proliferation of digital currencies like Bitcoin. Most countries are concerned with the vulnerability of holding or conducting transactions in USD, especially when their assets can be seized or frozen over political issues with the United States.
The constitution of each country is not equal and the same, but thanks to the organization's framework, the win of one is also the win of all.
As Asia Times argues, the weaponization of the dollar, the U.S. currency's use as an instrument of political pressure, has forced investors and policymakers to approach the risks associated with excess reliance on greenbacks more prudently. This growing dissatisfaction with the USD's central role in global finance drives the push for a more diversified multipolar currency system. If these trends continue, the US dollar may face significant challenges in maintaining its position as the dominant global reserve currency, with alliances like BRICS and ASEAN playing pivotal roles in reshaping the international financial landscape. James Steele of HSBC is still optimistic about the trend of the US dollar being the world reserve currency for the next few years because of increasing pressure from the BRICS and other developing nations. In 2022, the economist Steele provided some evidence that, despite the trend of central banks, especially of BRICS, to diversify their reserves away from the US dollar and buy gold, these trends will not drastically challenge the dollar's hegemony in the international financial system. From this perspective, Steele anticipates that the US dollar will remain the world's leading reserve currency for the next 10 to 20 years, and possibly much longer.
Paul, at a time when you have falling treasury prices and even hedging costs are getting a bit higher now?
By pointing to the absence of a suitable substitute in the international financial system, Steele emphasizes one of the key factors that inspire optimism about steel. However, the current efforts by the BRICS and other nations towards de-dollarization, local currencies, and gold are not considered viable options to replace the greenback in trade and as reserves. Again, based on HSBC's forecast, the US dollar argues that, as much as the trend of people diversifying their facilities is on the rise, it is almost impossible for any other currency in the world to compete with the US dollar, because there is no other currency in the world that has the factor of size, liquidity, and stability needed to be used globally.
Here's a graph on the balance of trade from the US trade in goods with China, with data that we collected from the United States Census Bureau. As you can see, the balance has been growing big and fast from 2000 to 2018.
HSBC further drew a link between the size of the U.S. economy, the financial markets, its military and geopolitical power, and the continued dominance of the U.S. dollar. The state interest, while the attempts of BRICS and other developing countries to diversify away from the dollar are getting the increasing attention of analysts, HSBC asserts that it will barely affect the dollar's dominance in the coming years. In conclusion,
now look, I mean, still at the end of the day, the hedging costs for most major currencies are still fairly low, whether it's for the US versus...
Despite the challenges posed by de-dollarization movements, HSBC's analysis points to a continued vital role for the US dollar as the dominant global reserve currency for the next 2 to 3 decades, reinforcing the US's financial sovereignty in the worldwide market.